Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today we're here with Brendan Lowery, Quality Auditor here at Core Business Solutions. Thanks for being here today, Brendan.
Thanks for having me, Xavier.
It's just wonderful for you to be here. I know this will be your first time on the podcast, and we're pretty excited. At Core Business Solutions, our ability to work with companies extends well beyond 9001. We support our customers with an array of ISO standards, cybersecurity, and other standards with consulting, training, and software. Today, we'll be discussing how to nail your internal audits. But before we begin, Brendan, could you share with us a little bit about your experiences and your journey?
Absolutely. I have about a dozen years of experience in quality in a variety of industries. I began my career as a quality technician with a bottled water company before working at Purell, the world's largest maker of hand sanitizer. I then transitioned into automotive for a couple of years as a lead quality engineer for a tier 1 automotive supplier. And then my last position before I joined Core was with a chemical distributor. I acted as their director of quality assurance, where I managed an ISO 9001 2015 QMS for a few years. So when the opportunity came up to join Core, I was super excited because I wanted to help organizations better understand what an internal audit is and how to get ready to address things that could come out of them.
That's great. Seems like a ton of experience in a lot of different places. Certainly glad you are here today. So to start us off, what are the key elements or requirements that organizations need to focus on during an internal audit?
Well, when conducting an internal audit, I'm assessing your QMS against the entire standard, correct? Not just certain clauses.
Okay.
But I will say that a few sections or clauses tend to stick out as the most important to me.
And what might those be?
So first, I would say Section 4, which is the context of the organization. No matter what standard we're talking about, you have a Section 4 context of the organization there.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, for me, the foundation of the QMS. Has your organization defined internal and external issues? Have you defined what your key processes are? These are a couple of key deliverables I need to see when I'm doing my internal audit.
That makes sense.
Next, I would say 6.2.
Okay.
Quality objectives. So, you spend all this time building this quality management system and then, managing it day in and day out. But how do you know that it's working or that it's successful?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have objectives or goals for how you're looking to perform? As an auditor, I'm trying to understand what those objectives are. Are they measurable? How is your QMS doing? And those objectives help in showing that.
Okay.
I would say next would be control of documented information, which should be Section 7.5. So every organization that's certified to any sort of quality management system standard, you have procedures, you have processes, work instructions, things that you need day to day with your job.
Yep, we have a ton of those, no matter who you are.
Yes, exactly. So it's important to understand that, how do I access those documents? Who has access? How is that controlled? How are documents revised? How do you know that you have the correct revision, the most current revision of a document?
If you're talking about work instructions, you want to make sure you have the proper ones that are most up to date.
Yes, exactly. So it's one thing that I want to understand is how you're managing that information, and I want to be able to see that change process for that information. I would say last couple to me, I would say Section 8, operation. Now there's a lot in there. That's the largest section by far.
Okay.
And that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? This is going to cover how you produce the parts or provide the services that your organization, is based upon. How do you purchase raw material? How do you design those products? How do you handle parts that you make that are non-conforming or bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot in there. So I want to see how your organization is planning that product and service provision. If I could tie everything together, I would say Section 9.3, management review. That really acts as kind of a nice barometer when I'm doing an audit, if I can say that. So the standard requires the organization to conduct meetings periodically on a long list of topics.
Mm-hmm.
And so during an audit, I want to see that you have those meetings planned out. I can see that there are minutes and discussion minutes available, notes that can show me that you covered all those items, that you're planning and conducting meetings accordingly. So if management review in an audit goes really well, that tends to, lead into a nice audit.
That's great.
Whereas if I see a lot of issues with management review, you don't judge a book by its cover, but it does tend to show some issues in other areas after that too.
Generally, if you see the management's really has buy-in and really works with the management system, quality management system, or whatever management system they're working on, you're probably going to have it flowing down to where people are doing it every day. It's just part of their job.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I can certainly see how those can be some of the more important aspects for sure. I know in the past, especially with 9001, documentation was just a huge thing. But how does proper documentation of processes and procedures contribute to a successful ISO internal audit?
It's funny you say that. I had an audit recently where any audit I do, I always start out the same way. I say, okay, we're going to review your process diagram. All right. Now, a good process diagram will show the inputs to the process, what is needed to execute the process. Of course, then the actual steps, what you're doing in each step to execute the process, and then the outputs, what's coming out of that.
Right.
And so we're looking at the process diagram, and I always begin the same way. I say, is this diagram accurate? Such an instant question. So is this what you're doing? And usually I get a yes, right? But sometimes it's like, well, no. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly the best start, right? Like if we go and we're looking at the process diagram and it's not actually what you're doing, then do we have a process diagram? Or it's obviously not a correct process diagram. So,
or is there something that was revised that we've recently updated?
Yeah. So it's important to understand that, having a good process diagram that's easy to understand, easy to follow, is one that your employees can remember, right? And then it's easy to explain during an audit. Okay, this, here's our 5 steps. We do this, this, this. Here is my evidence. Okay, for step 1, here's this document. It makes it very clean and easy to go through.
Well, so it really is important to have a good handle on all aspects of your process and each step involved from beginning to end. If we don't have a good and well-defined process, or like you said, they say, well, not really, this is what we follow. Does that lead to a non-conformance? And what is a non-conformance in the context of a nice internal audit? And how can organizations really effectively identify and address them, even maybe before the internal audit?
Non-conformances for me are gaps. Okay. So, for instance, elementary example here, but let's say there is a clause of the standard that requires you to do, 3 things, X, Y, and Z. And during my process audit, I don't see any evidence of Z, for instance, right? That's an audit non-conformance for me. I am so excited. This is the thing I was most excited to be on here today for, honestly. So I say this a lot during audits, but I feel like I need to really drive it home. It is okay to have a non-conformance or non-conformances in your internal audit. That's the whole point of the activity, right? So sometimes I conduct an internal audit and the organization's like, oh, darn. I'm like, no, this is great. I would much rather us find these things now and then take some time to address them with corrective action than wait or have them come up during your registrar audit.
Well, and also you get a chance now to show that you addressed a nonconformance and how you did it to the actual registrar auditor.
Yes. Yep. Gives you some time to create a document, kind of walk through. And, how do organizations address nonconformances? Well, with corrective action, at the conclusion of your internal audit, you'll have a closing meeting with any audit that you have. And during that closing meeting, you should walk through any nonconformances. And so we'll say, hey, these were these 2 areas that we had nonconformances in today. These will require corrective action. Corrective actions are specific actions aimed at addressing the root cause of those problems. And the reason why we do that is we don't want them to happen again, right? It would be not a good thing for us to say, hey, we have an issue in this area, and then we come back the next year. Oh, we still have an issue in this area. We still have an issue the following year. We want to make sure that we avoid those repeat nonconformances.
Right. Every system is going to have some shortcomings. We're just human. It's part of it. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's one individual's fault. It can be a process fault. It can be a change that's happened. And now when you're going back and finding root cause, you can address the actual issue and make things better. So it's just like the first time you try to hit a baseball. If everything was judged by that, no one would continue. But no, you learn from it. Anything in that steps.
Yeah, it's your first attempt.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have all of these insights that you've gained from the internal audits. How can you leverage those to drive continuous improvement and even enhance your overall quality management system?
There seems to be this connotation. I mean, rightfully so. Audits generate nonconformances. And that's true. But they generate more than that, right? They also generate opportunities for improvement, OFIs, right? So I describe observations or OFIs as suggestions for the organization as they continue to grow and mature. You may have a training process that works for you today, with 5 employees,
Mm-hmm.
but you may want to have develop a more mature process as your organization grows to 10, 20, et cetera. So there's a specific clause or section of the standards, actually the last clause, 10.3, continual
Okay.
improvement. It indicates that the organization shall consider the results of evaluation to determine if opportunities need to be addressed for improvement. And so I would say that, an internal audit is an evaluation of your organization's QMS, a snapshot. So getting OFIs out of them is a good way to say, hey, all right, here's some things that we can improve on in the next year, or maybe take a look at improving if we want to devote some resources or time to them.
So just like for that baseball analogy, through opportunities and OFIs, you're going to get some improvement suggestions. Now, let's say company's about ready to start doing their internal audit. What are some of the common challenges that they might face during prepping for those, and also the execution of the ISO internal audits? And do you have some best practices to overcome them?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing that comes to mind for me is going to be, something we've mentioned already, honestly, and that's going to be management buy-in. It's interesting when you do these. Oftentimes, these audits are planned months or a year in advance, and then when the audit day comes, sometimes we see organizations will tell us, "Oh yeah, the process owners are unavailable today, or they're just too busy." I certainly respect that 100%. Please don't think I do not, but we want to make sure that those process owners are available to actually conduct the audit, right? And I'm pretty lenient, on that. If there's a health issue or something, of course. But we want to make sure that we have the process owners available.
Yeah, you can't do a full audit if the process owners aren't there.
Exactly. It makes it hard. I would much rather find out about that ahead of time. Hey, so-and-so is going to be out. Can we reschedule? That's a
Mm-hmm.
much easier reschedule than finding that out kind of during the audit when we're partway done and just, oh, okay, I guess we'll, try to reschedule this process for later. A good way to try to mitigate that is just make sure that your management is involved in the scheduling, right? Make sure, hey, our audit's going to be September 18th. And, is there anybody that's unavailable? And kind of keep reminding them periodically about that. Hey, our audit's next month, just checking in. We're still okay, right? That sort of thing. So that's a biggie for me.
You talked about the importance of management support. So if they're one of the process owners, showing up and being available for internal audits, you're embodying that. And you're also embodying the importance of it if you make sure with reminders saying, hey guys, don't forget, month out, we have our internals audits coming up. Make sure your team's ready to be supportive with that if they're going to be audited as a process owner or anything like that.
Along with that, this may seem like such a small thing, but then during the audit, it's always kind of an interesting hurdle. Making sure that you have a way to share your audit evidence, right? And if I'm conducting a business development process audit, I'm going to ask you for examples of quotes that you sent to customers, of contracts, of purchase orders. And so there's always this fun bit every once in a while where we get to that point, and then the customer looks at me and they're like, how do I show this to you? I try to cover these things during the opening meeting, of course, but can I take a picture and send it to you? Can I, I was like, well, if you scan it and screen share, obviously if I'm on site with you, just hand me the document. I'll take my notes and slide it back to you. But
or if they store it in core, it's going to be really easy for them to show it.
Absolutely. Yes. So it's always kind of a fun exchange when, you have somebody that maybe isn't so tech savvy and they're kind of confused on what to do. So we try to handle that as best we can. Really, the thing that's most often comes up in this is just the challenge of knowing that you need to conduct internal audit and having somebody who is qualified or trained on how to do it. Organizations can certainly target and say, we're going to do our audit here in April. And then let's say there is a hot button issue, a fire comes up in March, and the organization looks at themselves and say, oh, well, you know what? It's really not a good time for us to do this audit right now. We have this big bid that's going to be closing, so we'll slide it to May and then to June. And so you see that a lot where organizations, they may, their heart's in the right place, but they kind of push their audit out, keep doing so, or they forget to conduct one at all.
Wow. Yeah.
They are required by the standard that you conduct internal audits at planned intervals. And so if you're an organization that's having trouble with that, I would say we would be delighted to help you. Our internal audit team, there's several of us, we've been very blessed in terms of having some great people on our audit team. I'm just one of several. I'm very glad to be a part of that team. We'd be glad to help you with anything that you may need, any standard, not just ISO 9001.
I think that some companies, they see that and they think internal, and it's called internal. So they think we have to do it internally by ourselves. But it can really be a blessing for a lot of reasons to have a third-party person or group, organizations like CORE, help with your internal audit. I know in the past we've mentioned that some of the struggles with that have been not having enough staff. If you're a small place, you can't audit yourself, as you know, if you have 2 or 3 people there and you're a process owner and you're doing the audit. You need to be trained on how to do an internal audit. How can you be impartial if you're auditing your boss? That could be a struggle.
Correct, yes.
And as you mentioned, well, let's push this down the road. You're less likely to push it down the road if you have an outside group coming in that's going to be helping you.
I think it adds to the formality of the event. I've been a part of previous organizations where, they'll say, we're going to do an internal audit, and it can be a very informal table exercise where you're all kind of sitting around a table, kind of talking about your day or your week, as opposed to really the task at hand. And so, just like you said, I think you said it very well. Somebody coming in from outside the organization who doesn't come in with any preconceived notions about the processes, or doesn't have a boss at the organization.
Right.
I think it really lends itself to a very productive audit.
With all of these points, they can really be helpful in nailing your internal audit, even if you do use a third party. And you've done this, as you said, quite a bit. Do you have any stories where a business really did a good job in their internal audit, and maybe where we helped them with things and it went really well, and that continued on through their other audits, their surveillance audits and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I can think of a couple examples for sure. First organization I can think of was one that had created their own quality management system, and they felt they were in a good position for their registrar audits. They hadn't scheduled them yet, but they felt good. And so they hired our organization to come in and conduct an audit. And we kind of found that there were several areas of non-conformity there. We said, hey guys, these are some things that you need to address ahead of time. They went ahead, completed those corrective actions, and spoke with us, kind of interacted, would this be an appropriate response? Yes or no, and why? And we worked through each of those areas and put them into a good position to where when they went through their registrar audit, they had, 0 non-conformances.
That's
and everything
awesome.
went very well. So that comes to mind. I hear this feedback quite often where, they're going through the implementation of their standard, of their QMS, and they get to the internal audit and they say, wow, this is a really good experience for us because it helped to connect the dots. We were working on all of these different processes, procedures, and at the end of the day, why you're doing it, but kind of then seeing the direct correlation where, I see now I have 5 key processes because of clause 4.4. I see, my objectives, they need to be measurable because of 6.2. Seeing those connections makes organizations feel very good.
So almost a better understanding of the actual standard that you're certified to.
Yes. Yep. You feel like you have some ammunition, what I mean? Oh, okay. All right. I feel good. All right. This is why I have this. This is why I have that. And so audits can help kind of affirm that confidence going into your registrar.
Well, that's really awesome. And that's just great. I really want to thank you for being here today, Brendan, and sharing all this with our listeners, maybe some ways that they can improve their internal audit, some things to think about, perhaps reaching out to us if they do want that third party to help give them an impartial outside point of view. Really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me, X. Let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. We'll have you on again. And we want to thank each one who's listened today to our podcast. We hope it's been informative for you, and maybe you found a little bit about internal audits that you didn't know before. If you're looking for more information about how Core Business Solutions can help you with ISO certifications or internal audits, perhaps help with cybersecurity, whatever your needs might be, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. And you can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to do so, and that way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.